You're welcome to Business Highlights on Trust TV, a show dedicated to bringing you top economic and business development of the week. My name is Chamun Dabeng. Let's begin. Well, the week opened with the Monetary Policy Committee, which held its first meeting for the year on the 24th and 25th of January. During the meeting, major economic issues were discussed, some of which were global inflationary pressures, the COVID-19 pandemic and its various strains, persisting supply bottlenecks, and the inevitable commencement of monetary policy normalization by major central banks in developed economies. The committee also made decisions on whether to tighten, hold, or loosen its stance on policies in the long and short term. Let's take a look at Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele make the announcement while reading the communique.
In its determination as to whether to hold or loosen or tighten its policy stance, MPC was mindful that whereas the US and some advanced economies have signaled their intention to commence policy normalization, which may result in capital flow reversals for the emerging market and developing economies, the major focus of these climbs were targeted mainly at reining in the high level of inflation, which had been unprecedented in the last 4 decades in those climbs. For Nigeria, members were of the view that Nigeria is confronted by not only inflation, but also fragile output. As a result, MPC believes that its current stance of price and monetary stability, conducive for growth, remain desirable. The MPC is convinced that various measures being implemented were helping not in boosting output growth, but also in moderating inflation. MPC therefore enjoined management to continue to use its development finance tools to accelerate output growth, which would also help in boosting manufacturing output that would ultimately help in moderating prices. It also requested management to continue its use of administrative measures, including discretionary tools at its disposal through the CRR to control money supply in the economy. In its final consideration, the committee was clear that a loosening option was not desirable because it would trigger further liquidity surfeit and fuel inflationary pressure as available funds may outstrip the economy's absorptive capacity or domestic capacity utilization. It also feels loosening could trigger foreign exchange demand pressure as the excess liquidity will be channeled to either frivolous importations or speculative holding on foreign exchange as alternative investment channels narrow, leading to foreign exchange depreciation and or inflation. MPC also dropped a tightening option at this meeting in view of the fragile state of the current gross domestic product growth rate and potential external and domestic headwinds confronting the economy. MPC also feels that tightening could truncate the steady improvement in credit performance, including other financial soundness indicators, and reverse the declining trend in NPLs. Moreover, MPC feels tightening could counteract the CBN's credit expansion motive as a necessary condition for improved economic growth and employment generation. The MPC therefore concluded that a hold stance remains desirable at this time, as this would indicate a conservative but cautious and consistent policy choice given the prevailing economic conditions and outlook, thus strengthening the policy credibility and focus. It also feels that a hold would signal MPC's realization of the fragility of the growth recovery and its sensitivity to emerging global and domestic uncertainties. Hence, the need to sustain policy trajectory. After a careful balancing of the benefits and downside risks of each policy option, MPC decided to hold all policy parameters constant, believing that a hold stance will enable the continued permeation of current policy measures in supporting the recorded growth recovery and further boost production and productivity, which would ultimately rein in inflation in the short to medium term.
The committee resolved to hold the monetary policy rate and all other policy parameters constant. The benchmark interest rate MPR retained at 11.5%. The asymmetric corridor remained at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR. The cash reserve ratio retained at 27.5% and the liquidity ratio retained at 30%. So far, financial experts have been divided over the decision of the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee's resolve to retain key lending rates. Some analysts said the development meant tougher days ahead for Nigerians and companies, while others said the MPC had no choice but to leave the key rates unchanged. Now, I had two analysts on Business Daily with me, and that was economist and financial analyst Stephen Wachuku and business developer John Bosco Ezenwa, and here are their opinions on the CBN's decision to keep all parameters constant.
Yes, just one of these meetings that CBN often have, actually, to take decisions regarding to monetary policy issues. Now they choose to do what I call sit down the look, because constantly, or in last, I think 15 or 20 meetings, CBN have hold or retained its rate, meaning that CBN is apprehensive. CBN is not that too sure of what, if it adjusts any of those very parameters, what it will actually result to the economy. They choose to watch and look, continue to watch and look. Yeah, some people may also say it's very good because you have not seen most of those variables or those parameters or macroeconomic parameters that will actually drive those very fundamental shifts that you require. But if there are obvious facts, obvious issues around that could have resulted you reducing or increasing your interest rate, there are facts there. Looking at the inflation rate is actually driving up again after maintaining a consistent drop from about 20 or 19% down to about 15.6 or thereabout now. Now, what CBN ought to have done is to have loosened up the cash reserve ratio so that more money will be available to the banks. You still kept that 30%. If you have reduced it like to 27 or to 25 or to 28%, it would have reduced more money available to banks. And once banks have more money, it means they're going to drive growth because they will have more money to lend to SMEs or to lend to captives of industry. This area needed CBN to have adjust your cash reserve ratio so that there will be more flows of trillions or millions of naira or billions of naira available to lend to the public.
All right, John Bosco, what are your thoughts on the parameters remaining constant?
So, just like Mr. Stevens mentioned, CBN is actually observing. We agree they're observing. I haven't done a lot of meeting all of this time. We still maintain the percentage. So that leaves the CBN continue to look at the economy. If you release, as I mentioned, if you release more funds to the banks, we understand that the banks really want to lend, but the lenders may not even be coming forward. They prefer to go to other kind of lending opportunities to see how they drive. But the CBN haven't done this, haven't left it at this point. It's early, if you ask me. We're in the first quarter of the year, so the first 1 month in the quarter. Still, as we mentioned, the inflation rate is up, which is coming from the last quarter of 2021. So the CBN is observing, and we believe that this is good. For me, I think it is okay for now to observe, to let it be at what it is. Let's see how other forces can change this, because this.
So you agree with the whole stance?
Yeah, I do agree with it. I do agree with it because, but not being biased. People are actually lending to survive, not for businesses. That's why you have all the loan sharks. People are going to companies, all of these lending agencies or businesses to say, give us money. But the monies are not put in business. They are simply put in maybe family survival or things like that. But so the CBN doing this will maybe drive the banks to go out, create more products for businesses and people to come lend money to do business, not just to survive.
Well, the governor of CBN defended the decision of the committee to take a hold stance because the current parameters have worked for the nation. The Central Bank of Nigeria also announced that the increase of interest rates in advanced nations will not affect Nigeria, as the funds released in these economies through stimuluses did not flow into the country. He further explained that the advanced economies are only raising interest rates because they are facing significant uptick in inflationary pressure, whilst Nigeria has been witnessing moderations except for in December 2021, which he said is temporary and transient. Well, that's all on that story. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we move on to our next discussion. Don't go anywhere.
From all around the world,
our news is factual and concise,
giving you fresh news as it breaks.
Nigerians in the diaspora have decried the unavailability of Nigerian passport booklet.
One tricycle rider feared death while 6 others are critically injured after a moving train hit.
When I sit on the news desk every day,
there's a deep sense of responsibility that overwhelms me.
A responsibility to deliver a message to our viewers
in the most professional way possible. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
You're welcome back to Business Highlights on Business Daily. My name is Chamun Dabeng. Before the end of 2021, Nigerians were hit hard with the news that subsidy on fuel was going to be removed by June 2022. The news was immediately trailed with reactions by Nigerians. Labor groups like Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress spoke up against it, arguing that it would make life very difficult for the citizens of this country. The pressure groups took it a step further by threatening to protest. Well, in a recent turn of events, the federal government made the decision to retain fuel subsidy indefinitely. To suspend fuel subsidy indefinitely and work on amending the 2022 budget to provide funds for that purpose. According to the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, the government came to the realization that the timing of its planned removal of petrol subsidy is problematic and will worsen the suffering of Nigerians. Let's take a look at the minister make the announcement.
Stating the fact that, let me start by stating the fact that we did make a provision in the 2022 budget for fuel subsidy for January to June. And that suggests that from July that there will be no subsidy. And this provision was made sequel to the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act that has made a provision that all products will be deregulated. Subsequent to the passage of the Act, we went back and amended the fiscal framework that was submitted to National Assembly to incorporate this demand. But after the budget was passed, and we have had consultations with a number of stakeholders, it became clear that the timing is problematic, that practically there is still heightened inflation, and also removal of subsidy will further worsen the situation, thereby imposing more difficulties on the citizens. And Mr. President clearly does not want to do that. So what we have to do now is to continue with the discussions that we're making in terms of putting in place a number of measures, one of which is the deployment of an alternative to the PMS, which is the CND, and also the rollout of enhanced refining capacity in the country, including the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery, and also the rehabilitation of the 4 national refineries that have a combined nameplate capacity of 450,000 barrels per day. The increased refining capacity in the country means we will need to import less products. But also, as we're discussing right now within the executive the possibility of amending the budget, we may need to come back to the National Assembly by way of amendment to make additional provision for fuel subsidy from July 2022 going forward, or whatever period is agreed is the right timing. So.
Now, we went out to the streets to find out what Nigerians thought of the suspension on subsidy removal, and here is what they had to say.
The removal of subsidy, it's a good one, but in an organized system. But if it's an unorganized system, I don't think it's welcomeable, because it's going to backfire down to the grassroots, because the prices of things are going to rise, and there's going to be high rate of inflation, and but for a wise, I think this is the first time I've seen the government think twice, because I don't know, because tomorrow they can even decide to change that. They didn't say anything. That's how it has been happening in the system. But on the truth is that if they can think of suspending it, I think it's a good one, because I don't think Nigeria itself, they are not ready for removal of the subsidy. Because removal of subsidy, you have to really plan for the welfare of the people which you are ruling. Also plan for the welfare of the system to make it to work much better.
It's a good one for now, because if you want to remove subsidy, that means you should increase income. All this stuff like minimum wage, they were calling over 29 or 30,000 thereabout. It should rise too, okay? Because as soon as the subsidy is removed and the fuel is increased, everything in the market down to whatever, the price will rise too. So we all attend the same market. So where would you raise the extra funds for to make up for your purchases and upkeep? So the solution is a good one.
Yes, it's a good attempt, and based on these current situations where Nigerians are facing a lot of problems, high inflations, you understand, if you can see now everything's like it's even doubling itself in terms of price, and definitely fuel subsidy, when the government removes the fuel subsidy, everything will double itself. There must be an inflation. So it's a good, nice attempt to suspend it for this time at this current situation.
The suspension of the fuel subsidy issue is something that the government is supposed to look at the issues, what people are suffering in this country. That's the reality. So the suspension of the issue of the fuel subsidy, because I heard the Senate President was mentioned that yesterday. I think it's a great idea. Instead of now they are going to put this issue back. You see, the best thing is that for people to have fear of God. Anything that is going to put people into trouble or into circumstances, they should be able to look at it carefully or look at it very well, so that they can now be able to say, yes, this is the best thing for Nigerians. Let's find a way of moving the masses forward. That, I think, to me, that's the best way they can do it. It's not that something, but okay, if they now put this subsidy, what is the achievement of it? What is the achievement from the government? What is the achievement from the masses? I think, to me, I think they let them look at it carefully, so that they can be able now to bring in a good idea or solution, so that people can now be able to be happy with the government.
As you can see, Nigerians are happy about the turn of events and see the suspension of subsidy removal as a victory. But is it really? Let's take a look at the comments of political analyst Joseph Ago.
I think it's good and bad. But I think in the immediate it's a good thing, but and long term it's a bad thing, because we're just delaying that doomsday. Mm-hmm. First of all, it doesn't make economic sense it doesn't make common sense for Nigeria to subsidize petrol. I mean, you can't subsidize a product that you have comparative advantage in. It doesn't make economic sense to subsidize, because what we're doing is that we're subsidizing for West Africa, because we have very open borders. We have trans-border racketeering with PMS. And if you look at all the other countries around, that surround Nigeria, Nigeria's petrol is cheapest. So people are smuggling petrol out of Nigeria into places like Cameroon, Niger Republic, Benin Republic, and so on and so forth. It doesn't also make developmental sense to still keep subsidy, because these monies can go into critical sectors like education, healthcare, infrastructure, roads, and so on and so forth. But in immediate, it's a good thing, because this government, for example, has lost a lot of credibility. This government campaigned, or this administration campaigned on the fact that, on the basis, one of their campaign points was that subsidy was a scam. So we expected that once this government assumes office, they would go after the scammers. But that was not done. They, at the outset of this administration, a lot of people judged the administration by its intentions. So they promised a lot of things, including looking at the oil sector. At some point, after 6 months after the government was fully formed, the government was judged by its actions. And we saw the president taking the responsibility of oil minister. But that didn't solve any problem. I mean, we still had ballooning fuel subsidies. We still had cases of people taking money for fuel subsidies but not even supplying a drop of petrol. And now, this government is being judged by its inactions. And a lot of people are not giving the government the benefit of doubt at this point, because it has squandered a lot of trust that it enjoyed in the beginning days of the administration. So people want a deregulated oil sector. People want monies to go into various sectors or other sectors of the economy. But at this point, majority of Nigerians don't trust this government to remove subsidy and also at the same time make life better.
Now, there's been so much back and forth on the issue of fuel subsidy. Does the country remove it or not? It has been a hot topic for governments past and present. Now, part of the reason cited for the suspension on the removal of subsidy is the current fragile state of Nigeria's economy. How would it cost? How would it affect the cost of transportation, manufacturing, inflation rates, and the lives of Nigerian citizens, who, of course, will bear the brunt of it all? Right after the break, we'll take a look at the developments on the matter. You're welcome back to the show, and we're currently taking a look at the suspension of subsidy removal by the federal government and its possible implications. Now, the president's special advisor on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, said Nigeria will have to pay a price to continue subsidizing premium motor spirit, popularly known as petrol. Now, saying that the country may be left with no other choice than to continue borrowing to shoulder its fiscal overhead costs. Now, the implication of an increase in debt servicing may also mean less funds in years to come for infrastructure development, as the country's current debt servicing figure is 22% of the total budget and may increase with more borrowings. Further development on the matter, Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has requested for the sum of 3 trillion naira to continue to subsidize fuel in the country. However, governors have kicked against the amount, saying that even though subsidy won't be removed immediately, what the country is incurring needs to be efficient. Now, let's take a look at the comments of Nigeria Labour Congress President Ayuba Waba.
I think it's still a very thorny and controversial issue because I'm not sure empirical data have been used to arrive at such a figure, especially within the context of the fact that even the volume of PMS that is being consumed daily remains a mystery and a controversial issue. A lot of figures have been actually quoted, including the fact that half of the figure quoted is said to be the amount of PMS also being smuggled out of the country on a daily basis. And our perspective is that, well, with the advancement in technology, we can be able to track every liter of PMS that is consumed in Nigeria, from the truck that is conveying the PMS to the filling station. And in the filling station, every vehicle taking every liter of PMS, we should be able to do that. But I think what has happened over time is that I think because of the incentive in such a very perverse environment, people then tend to take every Nigerian for granted. So for me, it's a mere figure that have been quoted. Some interrogation need to go into it, and that is purely the responsibility of government to be able to do that. In the challenge that we have with scarce resources, I think every kobo should count and every kobo should be tracked. So basically that will be our perspective as organized labor or as NLC. Going forward, first is to bring about transparency and accountability, even in the management of what we call subsidy, and that can be done. Secondly is actually the issue of encouraging the building of modular refineries to address even this issue of the hike in the price of diesel. Diesel have been fully deregulated, but is now beyond the reach of many transporters that transport goods and services, including agricultural products. Today, before you hire a truck from Lagos to Fanat, you will be hovering around 800,000 or 1 million naira. It ought not to be so if actually we have this policy in place. And also the conversion of our vehicles to compressed natural gas, CNG, which is what is happening globally. First, it is environmentally friendly. It's also part of our commitment to addressing the issue of pollution. So that is the way to go. A lot of commitment have been made in the past. They were never kept. So I think we should be able to hold government accountable to be able to drive some of those policies. So I think this is the whole argument and also the position that Labour is bringing to the table.
Well, at the end of the day, this whole entire situation begs the question, is the country really ready for what may follow after the subsidy removal suspension? What next? All right, so that's all the time we have for Business Highlights, a segment on Business Daily on Trust TV. Yes, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. My name is Chamun Dabeng, signing out.